Welcome to our volunteer safety training for anyone who wishes to serve with minors at Great Commission Community Church. This training is for anyone who wants to serve in God's garden and our youth ministry. You are responsible to understand and submit to the policies laid out in this training, as well as in our volunteer safety manual. You've been sent a link to this manual. It's updated annually. We just updated it. Be sure that you have read it and understand it and have contacted me or Pastor Jonathan if you have questions about anything in this manual so that we can make sure that we're all on the same page. For the purpose of this training, anytime I refer to a child, I'm speaking about a minor who could be in God's garden or a youth in youth ministry. But for the purposes of this training, I will just be using the term child or children to refer to both of those age groups. First, I want to talk about the need for this training. Child abuse is defined as the treatment by act or omission of a child under the age of 18, often in the context of a relationship or responsibility, trust, or power that endangers or impairs the health or welfare of a child. It is estimated that as many as 1 in 4 children will experience some form of abuse before the age of 18. Abuse can be categorized as either physical, emotional, or sexual. And the purpose of this training, as well as the safeguards in here and in the manual, is to prevent any kind of abuse happening at Great Commission Community Church. What is the point of doing this training in the church? I know I get asked that question a lot. People see church as a safe place, and so they wonder why we would need to do this training. Sadly, child abuse can happen anywhere, and that includes the church or at a church-related event. If abuse does happen at Great Commission Community Church to a child, its staff and volunteers are liable if we have not done due diligence in screening or training of our volunteers. Most children who are molested know their victimizer. Only 10% of children are abused by a stranger, which means that 90% know their abuser. And so we want to have these precautions in place to prevent that. Sadly, often perpetrators look for an environment where children are easy targets, and that can include a church. They can look for a church without clear safety systems and safeguards in place, as well as accountability. And they will also look for one that does not have extensive screening of volunteers. And so the purpose of this training, as well as the volunteer guidelines that we have in place, helps hopefully deter a would-be predator from choosing in to serving in our ministry, and also prevent that person from being allowed to serve. We are deeply committed to the safety of our children, youth, and families. We also care about the safety and reputation of all of our volunteers and staff. These policies and procedures aim to protect both of those groups. We want to protect our children from abuse and our volunteers from allegations. The first thing that we're going to talk about is our process of recruiting ministry volunteers. These safeguards or steps are non-negotiables that every adult volunteer must go through if they wish to serve in God's garden or youth ministry. If for any reason you are missing any of these things, or you haven't completed them yet, or they have expired, you will be contacted by myself or Pastor Jonathan to update those things that we need so that we can make sure that everybody's file is up to date and every volunteer has been cleared at the same level across any ministry with minors at our church. The first thing that every volunteer needs to complete is an application. We have just updated this summer, and so many of you will be contacted and asked to go online and to fill it out. There's some additional questions that we've put in there in regards to criminal history, as well as your personal story and your testimony, because we want to just have across the board that we know the same amount of information about every volunteer. And so look out for an email about that and go online and complete it. It's not a lengthy form, but we do need you to complete it. If you choose to decline to complete it for any reason, that's fine. That's your choice. But then you will no longer be allowed to serve in God's garden or youth ministry. The next safeguard that we have in place is that every volunteer, we will run a national criminal and national sex offender check on you. This is so that we can show the government or a court that every volunteer has been screened, and it's also to keep possible sex offenders from volunteering in our ministry. These are updated every 5 years. So if you get an email from me or Pastor Jonathan saying that your background check has expired, please go through and complete the form so that we can rerun the check on you. There's a consent form that you have to fill out so that we can run that check on you. And we renew these every 5 years. So if you've been volunteering for a while and we ask you to redo your background check, that's why. It's because it's just expired. And we need you to redo that consent form in 1 month from when we contact you. We need 2 positive character references for every volunteer. We will email 2 people that know you well who are not family, and we'll ask them some simple questions about you and your character and to vouch for your character. As the last step that everyone needs to complete is this annual safety training that you're watching right now. We have to go through this training annually, every single year, every volunteer. So even if you've seen or been taught this material before, every year we go through this together, just as a reminder for everybody that these are our safety standards. Every volunteer is also responsible to know what is in this training as well as what is in this manual. This manual kind of fleshes out some things more in depth than I will go through in this training. And so you are responsible to know what's in this manual as well and make sure that you're submitting to those policies and you're living them out on a Sunday or at an event. The last thing that you're responsible for as a volunteer is to be reading and understanding ongoing communication throughout the year. So if you get an email from me, the family ministries director, or Jonathan Thornton, the youth pastor, or any pastoral staff about these are updates that we're making in regards to safety. These are new policies that we have in place. This is a different way that we're going to structure this class. You're responsible to read those emails and then to follow through with whatever those new policies are throughout the year. We do have lots of teenagers that serve with our little kids in God's Garden, and I love our teen volunteers. They are awesome, and they have a different set of requirements that they need to complete. They need to watch this training video once a year, go through that training, and they always need to be paired in a classroom with a cleared adult. They can't be the solo teacher in a room or alone with children. The last thing is that once they turn 18, if they wish to continue to serve at GCCC, then they must complete the adult training listed above within 6 months. The last thing I want to just make note of is Planning Center. Planning Center is our church-wide scheduling software that we use to schedule volunteers on a Sunday, as well as down the road, we might use it for scheduling volunteers at events. Please know how it works. If you don't know how it works, if you don't have it on your phone or you're confused about how to get on it and check your schedule, please contact me. We have training videos that we can send you, and I'm happy to troubleshoot with you any issues that you're having, but you need to know how it works. Please use that to accept or decline any requests, and this serves as accountability for us as a church and for you. So if there is an allegation, it gives us a clear and easy way to know. We can pull up Planning Center and show anyone this is who was serving in that class that day and this is who was not. And so please be making sure that your schedule is up to date. If you're not able to serve, simply decline. That helps us find a sub for you adequately, and it also makes sure we can guarantee adequate student to adult ratios on a Sunday or at an event. The following safety measures that we have in place create a culture of accountability. That's really the goal. If we can have multiple layers of accountability, then there's always someone who can vouch for you and say, you didn't hurt that kid because I was watching the whole time. And so all of these safeguards that I'm going to go over just help reinforce that culture of accountability. The first rule that we have, this is a non-negotiable rule across Great Commission Community Church. You are never allowed to be alone with a child. So never 1-to-1 ratio. And that just helps ensure that there's always more witnesses. There's always additional children or volunteers who can vouch for what happened, who can share their side of the story, and that provides additional evidence to help protect your name and your reputation. So always bring other children along with you. Take your whole class somewhere if you need to take a trip to another room or to the restroom, as we'll go through later. This also includes if you are a youth leader and you're driving youth to or from an event, you're never allowed to be alone with a teenager in your car. And that just protects your reputation. So just keep that in mind. You can always, if we're in a shared space, that's a lot of why we have our classes in small groups in shared spaces. We're even going to move to that at Arlington as well, is so that we have multiple layers of accountability and we always have another adult who can vouch for what happened. The next thing I want to go over is our group ratios. Some of these have been recently updated. Just we're always trying to keep at the top line as far as safety standards and adult to student ratios. So some of these may sound stricter than what you were doing in the winter before we stopped meeting. But just keep these in mind. These will be our new group ratios when we come back, and we'll need to maintain these. The first is for 0 to 2-year-olds. We want to always maintain a 1 adult to 4 children ratio. And there will always be a minimum of 2 adults in that setting with that age group. So always 2 helpers or a teacher and a helper. The helper might be a teen, but there will always be 2 people with the children. Our toddlers, 2s, 3s, and 4s, so our beans and our little sprouts, our ratio will be 1 adult for every 6 children. And there will always be a minimum of 2 adults or an adult and a youth helper, so that there's always multiple accountability and multiple people can help with that age. For pre-K, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we're going to have a 1 adult to 10 children ratio. For our youth, our grades 6 through 12th, we will have a 1 adult for every 10 to 12 teenagers. We're also working towards adding in additional floaters. As we have these shared spaces where we do small group, we want to have just an extra person who can be walking around. That might be myself, or I might schedule one of you as a volunteer to just be a floater for the day. And that just provides an additional area of accountability so that there's another set of eyes looking around, seeing what's happening. And this just provides additional accountability. It also protects should someone come into our space who's not safe. We meet in spaces that are public spaces. And so if someone were to come in and be looking to harm a child, this is just an extra set of adults who can show that person that I'm watching you, I see what you're doing, and can also be a safeguard to say, hey, we're meeting in here. What do you need? And those additional layers of safety have been shown to really deter predators, because it just shows that we're watching and we're keeping our kids safe. So down the road, if you are scheduled to be a floater or an additional helper, you're not assigned to a class, but you're just floating. You don't need to prep anything for the day. You're just an extra set of eyes and ears for the day. The next thing I want to talk about is our bathroom and diaper policies at Great Commission Community Church. A policy that we've had for a while and that we're going to continue with is that we do not change any diapers at GCCC. So in any nursery or toddler class, we do not change diapers, and that's a church-wide policy that we have. If you notice that a child in your care does need a diaper change, please text their mom and dad, say, little Jimmy needs a diaper change. Would you please come to the nursery and change their diaper? If mom or dad doesn't respond, you can text them again. Or even if you have multiple volunteers, one of you can go get their parent. But we, as volunteers, do not change diapers. If you are working with a child who is potty training and might have a pull-up on or some underwear, we are allowed to help them go to the restroom, and I will go over those policies in a moment. But if they have an accident or you notice that they need a new pull-up or they need a change of clothes, we need you to text their mom and dad as well and say, we need you to come to the Beans class or to Little Sprouts and to change their diaper or their pull-up or whatever it might be, so that we as a staff or volunteers are not doing that. In regards to how to safely take children to the restroom, Any child that is first grade and up, all the way through youth, may go to the restroom in same gender pairs or even groups. And that accountability will keep them safe. They will have multiple eyes to be looking out for each other. We don't ever want to create a scenario where a child is just walking down the hallway alone, because then that child becomes a target. But if there's multiple children or multiple teens together, it creates just extra layers of safety and accountability. For our children that are kindergarten and under, we need an adult to go with them to the restroom. Only female volunteers may take children to the restroom at Great Commission Community Church. This is just an extra layer of security. We love our male volunteers and we trust you, and we're really happy that you're on our team, and we want to protect your reputation. And so that's why this policy is in place. And in regards to female volunteers as well, we have some safeguards in place to protect you when you take a child to the restroom. So first of all, never take a child alone to the restroom. Always take a group. Always take your whole class if you need to. That's safer than taking one child. Even if the other children don't need to use the restroom, just say, that's okay, we're taking a field trip, and just take them to the restroom. That way you have extra eyes and ears. If possible, stay in a very visible area, even in the doorway of the restroom. If you're propping the door open or you're standing in the doorway of the restroom, that provides an additional level of accountability. The children can be in the restroom using the stalls, but you're just showing that you're out somewhere safe. You're protecting them. You're protecting the restroom from someone coming in, but you're also showing that you're not in the restroom doing anything inappropriate. Should a very young child need your assistance physically using the bathroom, which does happen from time to time, you want to make sure that you're leaving the stall open when you're helping them, so that if someone else were to come in, there's full transparency and that they can see that you're assisting a young child in going to the restroom, and it protects you from allegations. During that, you want to make sure that you're really clear with the child about what you're doing. Okay, I'm going to help you take down your pants now so you can get up on the potty. And you're being clear both to the child, but to the other children as well, as far as why you're in there and what you're doing, and as well as any other adult that might come in. You're just being really clear and above board that this is why you're helping this child. When the child is good and they don't need your assistance anymore, then you want to shut the stall and leave the stall and go back to a place where you're very visible so that that child can finish. And this is for children, like I said, kindergarten and under. We don't want children kindergarten or under in the halls, in our public spaces without an adult. I think that's too young to just kind of be roaming the halls. So this is how, if you have a child in that age group, you would take them safely to the bathroom. Now, male volunteers, we work very hard to make sure that you're never alone in a classroom with kids, because we want to be able to have somebody take them to the restroom. And so often we'll have our male teachers with a female helper, or vice versa, a female teacher with a male helper. We try not ever to schedule two males as the teacher and the helper in a class. And that's just because we want you to have the freedom, if some kids need to go to the restroom, to just do that. If for whatever reason, maybe somebody is sick and you're a male who's subbing and you find yourself in a classroom or in a small group where it's just two males running the classroom, then just ask another female teacher to take your children to the restroom. You're allowed to swap for that time and go watch their class while she does that. If you see one of those roaming helpers that I was talking about, who's just floating, you can ask that floater if that floater is a female to take your children to the restroom. You can also flag down me or Jenna and say, hey, I need help getting this kid to the restroom, and we will jump in. Female volunteers, if a male volunteer ever asks you to stop what you're doing and take children to the restroom, you just need to comply. Even if you're right in the middle of a lesson, that's fine. Just kind of swap with them. They can sit with your class for a minute or finish reading the Bible story, and you can take those kids to the restroom so that it's above board and we have just some safety standards, and we're protecting our male volunteers and their reputations. The next thing I want to talk about is what to do in the event of an accident or emergency. We have first aid kits in all of our class bins, in all of our nurseries and beans and everything like that. We always have first aid kits. If it's just a minor little paper cut, you're going to want to make sure you wash your hands, put on gloves if they're available, and have the child wash their hands with some antibacterial, put a Band-Aid on, and make sure you wash your hands again with the antibacterial or with soap and water. And then you can go back to your day. If it's any kind of major accident where there's a lot of blood, or just the child gets really hurt or is really distressed, or if you had to call mom and dad or 911, you need to fill out an accident report. The accident reports are in your class bins. They're all over. If you don't know where they are on a Sunday, just flag down another teacher or myself or Jenna or Pastor Jonathan and say, where's an accident report? I need one for this child or youth. You need to fill that out, and you and the parent need to sign it. And that shows that you have had a conversation with the parent about what happened. Now, maybe you're filling it out at the end of class with the parent, but you need to fill that out. And then you need to give that form to myself or Pastor Jonathan. If we're not there, if we're at another site that Sunday, you can take a picture of it front and back and send it to us. But we need a copy of that so that we can keep all of those on file. Should someone ever accuse us of neglect or not dealing with an accident properly, we want to have some kind of record that what we did and that we talked to mom and dad about it. If you ever feel like this is an accident where it's too much for you to handle, obviously get mom and dad, but also feel free to call 911. If you ever feel like someone has broken a bone or is bleeding and it won't stop, any kind of serious injury, let's just be overcautious. Call 911, get mom and dad right away. Feel free to grab another volunteer and just say, run into the service and get this child's parent, because we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep this kid safe. If the child is bleeding, please try to safely remove the child or the youth from other kids so that kids aren't touching other kids' blood. So maybe you're having the other kids move to the side, or you're pulling that child back. For evacuations, anytime we meet in public spaces, so anytime there might be a fire drill or any kind of other issue in the hotel or the high school or where we are that would require us to evacuate, you will need to make sure that you have some record of their attendance. For God's Garden, we have those clipboards. For youth ministry, you might keep track of that on your phone or on a piece of paper. But you need to know, who am I responsible for today? And you need to pick that up. And you need to take a quick glance at it and see who you have that day. So if the fire alarm's going off, you need to know whether you have 9 kids or 29 kids. Then you're going to calmly line your class up and take them out the closest emergency exit. Luckily, we're in public spaces that have those really clearly marked. Take them down a stairway in the hotel. Do not use the escalator or the elevator. Take them out a nearest exit door and get them somewhere safe where your class can wait for mom or dad. Once you get outside, you're going to count the children again. You want to make sure, do I still have 9 kids or do I still have 29 kids? Do not dismiss kids to parents while you're leaving. Often in these scenarios, parents are panicked and very afraid, and they might want to just grab their child from your care. Please just say, you're welcome to walk with us, but I cannot release any child until we get to a safe meeting location outside, and I've counted for everyone's attendance. If you're in Beans or nursery and you physically need help getting those children out safe, please open the doorway and just holler and yell for other teachers or parents to come assist you get children out. And often I'm sure parents will come running, but if you do need help, please do not hesitate to ask, even if you're with toddlers or something and you feel like I need some help. If you see our teenagers, please feel free to ask them to come and help pick up a baby as well. We want to get out safely. Once you're outside, count your class again, make sure you have the right numbers, and then you can text or call parents, let them know where you are, ask them to come get their children, check them out on the checkout sheet so that we have a record that every child was picked up safely, and then remain with all the children until they're all safely picked up and accounted for. Moving on to how we do registration and check-in and check-out. Our ultimate goal is by fall 2021 to have digital check-in. We want to get to a place where we can constantly keep track of who was in our children's ministry, who was at youth ministry. And so some of these changes might seem more security than what we were doing before, but that's because we're just constantly wanting to move towards more safety. The first thing is always wear your name badge. Whether you're teaching a toddler class or you're at youth ministry, you need some way to identify yourself that you're a safe, cleared volunteer. So youth leaders, be looking out for those when we start meeting again. You will need some way to let teachers, youth, parents, visitors know that you're a cleared volunteer and you're someone safe that they can leave your child with. For attendance, we're always going to keep track of who we have on site. So for God's Garden, we have those clipboards. We're always keeping track of that. Down the road, as we move towards digital check-in, we also might have keep track of that on our phones or on devices. But we always want to make sure that we're keeping track of who we have. That way, in the event of an emergency, you know how many kids you need to keep safe and which kids you're responsible for. I'm going to talk about God's Garden right now just for a minute, so our children's ministry. When children arrive, they need to be checked in the lobby. They need a name tag. This helps us know who they are, and it lets us know they've been safely checked in. You need to initial, either you or parent or who's ever doing check-in needs to initial that they're there. And then once they come to you and you're a small group leader or a teacher, you're checking them in again. And this additional level of security ensures that we're not losing kids throughout our building. When it's time to release children, you may only release a child to their parent or guardian. Please do not dismiss children to older siblings, just family friends that they've known forever, or especially with our Oaks class, don't just let them run off. I know I have 3 Oaks myself, and I know every week they will look you in the eyes and tell you, my parent's not coming. I don't need to wait for my mom or dad. I'm big enough to go. And every week we just need to dig our heels in and say, no, you need to wait here until your mom or dad comes and gets you. So please adhere to that, even if it's awkward or uncomfortable. Let's just have that line be a line in the sand that we keep our kids safe. At youth and ministry events, we're also going to keep track of who we have down the road. If we start youth group or have a youth event, we want to keep track of who we have. Youth, when you are ready to leave an event, you need to let a youth leader know so that we can keep track of who we're still watching and who has already been picked up. Moving on, we're going to talk about proper displays of affection and touch. In regards to appropriate touch, the following are recommended as pure, genuine, and positive displays of God's love. You want to meet the child at eye level, bend down or sit on the floor so you're at eye level with them. We always want to greet our kids when they come in appropriate ways, maybe a high five or a pat on the shoulder, or shake their hand and say, we're so glad that you're here today. We always want to pay attention to the child's cues. An adult should not be reaching down to grab a child's hand unless it's the case of an emergency and we're leading children out of a building for safety reasons. But as far as just affection, you want to follow the child's cues. So if a child reaches up to grab your hand, that's a great cue that child is okay with you touching them. And we don't want that to be adult-led. We want that to be child-led. Always ask permission if you're going to touch a child. We want kids to know that we respect their bodies and we're not going to touch them without their permission. We're only going to touch non-vulnerable parts of their bodies. So their hands, their arms, their shoulder, maybe their head. Really, that's it. We don't need to be touching any other part of a child's body. Unless you are, like I mentioned, safely helping a toddler use the restroom. If a preschool child or a toddler is crying, it's okay to pick them up or hold them, give them a hug. We want to aim for, especially kindergarten and up, we always want to work towards side hugs. We don't need to be doing front to front hugs with especially our older children. Sometimes, obviously, a little toddler will just kind of toddle up to you, and that's different. But anybody kindergarten and up, we want to just be doing side hugs, high fives, things like that. And those are ways we can encourage and affirm them and show them the love of Christ in appropriate ways. In regards to inappropriate touch, the following touch must be avoided at all times and are considered inappropriate. Kissing a child or coaxing a child to kiss you, extended hugging, tickling, or prolonged physical contact with a child of any kind. This also refers to youth, all of this. Touching a child in an area that is normally covered by a bathing suit is always inappropriate. The only exception would be if you are appropriately helping a toddler use the restroom like we talked about earlier. Carrying a school-age child or having them sit in your lap, we're not going to do that. That's considered inappropriate. Obviously, you can pick up a baby or a toddler if they need consoling. But we want to make sure we're not ever picking up school-age children and we're not having them sit in our laps. Being alone with a child or a teenager for any reason. This goes back to our never one-on-one rule. We're never alone with children at all. As well as giving a full contact body-to-body hug. This is for anybody kindergarten and up, especially youth ministry as well. We want our teen leaders to just be above board. So we always want to be doing that side hug, high fives, things like that. Even within same genders, we want to make sure there's just a lot of layers of accountability. The next thing I want to talk about is our health standards. I know that's even more on people's minds right now. Our goal is to constantly be limiting the spread of disease. So we continually ask that any sick child not come and be admitted to God's garden. If you notice that a child is sick and they're trying to come in, just ask mom or dad to keep them with them in the service for the day, as well as youth events. In our manual, we have a very detailed list of symptoms that we're describing as when we say someone is sick. So please make sure that you've reviewed that. This also applies to volunteers. If you feel sick, we're asking that you stay home as well. And this prevents other volunteers and other children from getting sick as well. You can decline in Planning Center to let us know you're sick, as well as contact myself or Pastor Jonathan to let us know that you're unable to serve. As we continue to work towards reopening the church, we will communicate additional cleaning safety practices. So please be looking out for those. You're going to need to read those when they come out, and you're going to need to make sure that you're adhering to those guidelines. And those guidelines may change. We're kind of in an up-in-the-air season, and so you might get a guideline 1 week and then a few weeks later get a different guideline. Just make sure you're up to date on those and that you're just keeping with whatever those new practices are. We never hand out or give a child or youth any medications anywhere at Great Commission Community Church. If a parent ever asks you to administer medications, simply decline and say, I'm not allowed to. That's part of our policy. But the mom or dad is welcome to come during the class if they need to and take the child out, give them the medication, and then check them back in. Any child 5th grade and under, if they have an allergy, needs to be given an allergy bracelet when they check in. It's those neon green, yellow bracelets. And that helps us know what allergy these kids have so that we can keep them safe. Our youth kids, we're going to assume that if they have an allergy that they are able to communicate that and also avoid those foods. As an additional precaution, we don't ever have nut snacks at GCCC, and that just protects our kids again. But the allergy bracelet is an additional level of security. The last thing I want to talk about is our discipline policy. Kids are kids and youth are youth, and sometimes they require discipline, correction, discipleship. But at no time and under no circumstance whatsoever will any member of the church staff or volunteer administer physical discipline to a child or youth. Our goal in discipline is reconciliation. It's always to show the child the love of Christ. Please always over-communicate any discipline measures you took to myself, to Pastor Jonathan, to Jenna, or who's ever supervising that day, as well as the child's parent. A parent should not find out 4 weeks down the road that their child has been disrupting your class every week. Please be over-communicating with parents in a very gracious way, but just letting them know, hey, I had trouble with little Jimmy today. This is what happened. This is what I did. We'd love to have them back next week. That's always the goal, is at reconciliation. The goal is not ever that there's behavior that's too much to keep you out of God's kingdom, but we do want to communicate what the behavior is to the child and to the parent that we expect when we're in our class or at youth group or at any event. Here's just some simple reminders as far as the steps to discipline. These have been helpful for me as I'm in a class to help me know what to do if a child or a youth is openly defiant or over disruptive beyond just being silly for 5 seconds, but you feel like, hey, I need to discipline this child. What are some safe ways that I can do that in a way that leads towards reconciliation? The first thing is remind the child what the what the good behavior is that you're looking for. Remind kids, hey, remember, we're all cleaning up right now. Hey, remember, we're not going to hit each other. We're going to be really kind with our hands. Or, hey, remember, we're not going to hang out outside during youth group. We're going to be in the building all together. So always be reminding what the positive behavior is to the child. And sometimes kids need a few reminders, and that's okay. Sometimes it helps even at the beginning of your class or your youth meeting or small group to remind everybody what the standards are. So remember, when we're reading the Bible, we're going to be doing that quietly, but later when we're playing a game, then we can run around. And just reminding them what the different behavior expectations are during different times during the event or the service. If that's not working, another great step is to redirect. Often it's helpful to just redirect children to a different activity. Maybe you have a toddler who's having a really hard time sharing blocks. Maybe just redirect him and say, hey, why don't you come and play with trains with me for a minute so that we can just calm down, and then we can go back to blocks later when you're ready to play nicely with them. So often just separating the child from the toy or from the other kid that they're having trouble with can just help redirect their brain, refocus them, calm them down. It focuses them on something else or someone else. And often this can happen if two children are kind of butting heads or two youth. Just redirect them, maybe put them in different groups, different teams, or whatever, so that they're redirected, their attention is redirected. The next thing is to remove the student from the situation. Now, when I say remove, I'm not implying we just kick kids out because I don't want that, but we want to remove them from the situation that's causing the distraction or the disobedience or whatever, the conflict, whatever it might be. And so that just might be something really simple as gently saying, hey, can you come here with me for a minute? You and me need to have a little talk. And maybe that's just coming over to a different corner of your classroom or just coming a few feet away from the table. You want to do this in a non-shameful way. So you don't ever want to be like, well, me and little Jimmy need to have a talk over here in a way that shames or embarrasses that child. We want to really model the love of Christ to our children and our youth. But just removing them from the situation often helps. Give them some time and space to process what's going on. Ask them what's going on. Ask them if they need a minute alone or if they want you to sit with them for a minute until they feel like re-engaging. Remind them again what the positive behavior is that we're looking for, and let them know as soon as they're ready to re-engage in that positive behavior, we'd love to have them join. Some kids need a moment alone without you, and that's fine. Find a safe spot where you can still see them, where they can just sit for a minute. Maybe they want to face the wall or just cry for a minute. That's okay. Give them their space. But sometimes kids want to sit with you and talk to you about what's going on or tell you how they feel about what happened, and that's fine too. Make sure that your class has somebody watching it. If you're kind of removed from your class, maybe ask another teacher to watch your class for a minute. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. And then you're just want to be constantly inviting that child back into your community when they're ready to, this is where I found it helpful to say, are you ready to do that positive behavior now? And when they've communicated yes, and their body seems calm again, and their actions and their words seem calm, invite them back into your group. And don't do it in a way that's shameful or embarrassing as far as the other kids. If other kids ask, why is Jimmy over there? Just ignore it and say, that's not any of your business right now. I'll worry about Jimmy. You worry about your blocks. If for whatever reason you've tried that multiple times and it's not working, or the child just is not ready to re-engage, that's when it's a great idea to text mom and dad and just say, hey, Jimmy's having some trouble listening today, or, Susie is not being able to follow the rules tonight at youth group. We would love it if you could come get her and we could talk together about what's going on, so that next week we'd love to have them back. Always be reinforcing to the child and to the parent that your goal is reconciliation and bringing that kid or youth back into what we're doing and having them participate again. Please be over communicative with parents and letting them know what happened, what you did, and that the goal is that you'd love to have them back next time. So just remember that goal is reconciliation, and also always be communicating with parents and with pastoral staff as far as what's going on, so that we're all on the same page. we kind of the last step that we always want to do is we want to pray. If we're having children who are learning what it means to look and act like Jesus, like we all are, only Jesus can do that in the life of a child. And so a great step in throughout all of this process is prayer. Maybe you've pulled a child aside and you're talking to them and they're just really upset, or they cannot forgive that other kid. These are great discipleship moments where we can say, hey, I think it might be okay if we pray for a minute for little Billy. I know you're really mad at him. Why don't we pray? And I can pray and you can repeat after me. And let's just ask Jesus to help you forgive him. If that seems appropriate, there might be other ways you can pray for the child. If they're physically hurt or just upset, maybe you're praying with them or inviting them to pray. As well as we've seen this with our Oaks class this fall. We had a lot of discipline issues almost every week. Almost every kid had discipline issues, and several of our teachers were very frustrated, and our parents were frustrated. And so honestly, we just had a prayer meeting about it. We did other things too, but that was where we saw breakthrough. A bunch of us teachers and parents came really early to church. We sat in their space and we prayed for an hour for their kids, for their hearts, for us. As teachers, we repented of things that we felt like, I'm being selfish, or I'm embarrassed. And we really saw breakthrough in that class. So I also want to just over-communicate that a great step that should be weaved into all of this is prayer and inviting Jesus to sanctify all of us and make us more like him. That's the end of our safety training. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure that you review this volunteer safety manual as well. Once you have watched this video and have read and understand this volunteer safety manual, please email myself or Pastor Jonathan to let us know I've completed the safety training. There will be additional training that we'll do throughout the year that covers vision, a mission, things that we want to do, how to be a better Bible teacher, things like that. But as far as safety training, please email one of us and let us know I watched this video and I read the manual, so that we have a physical record of that somewhere, that you've completed this training for 2020. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a great day. Bye.